it's Kelly and I am back with another video for Make It Crafty. This is Shy Suzie and I'm going to be using the falling backdrops from Simon Says Stamp for my background. I thought she was just adorable. You can get her with Shy Scott and make them a couple or just use one or the other. I wanted to just use her. So I printed her out on a A2 size card, so it's supposed to be 5.5 by 4.25. It's actually closer to 6 because I apparently don't know how to measure, so I end up trimming that down a little bit. But I wanted her to have a little bit of like a halo in the background. So I wanted it to glow out from her, so I didn't want to start out in the outer edges of the paper. I started on her where I knew I was going to be covering her up. First with picked raspberry, and then I went back in with seedless preserves. So it was a more pinky purple, and I kept the purple really close to just her. I didn't spread it out like I did the pink. And yeah, these distress inks are they're such fun to create backgrounds. You can do a bunch of different things with them. I kept this one pretty simple, but I wanted there to be some interest to the background. So I'm going to take these falling hearts and I'm going to do some second generation stamping. So I inked it up with the pick raspberry. I'm going to stamp it off one time and then stamp it onto the card. And you can see those hearts only go about halfway down the card. It's okay, I'm going to fix it. So stamp it off again and then stamp next to that. I wanted the hearts to go out a little farther, so now I'm actually doing third generation stamping. So they're really, really light, but still there, they kind of fade out. And then for the second portion of the card, I'm not inking up the whole stamp, I'm just inking up the bottom portion of it with my ink pad, stamping it off, and then stamping it again. I'm also going to do the third generation stamping one more time just to kind of fill it in. And it's not supposed to be lined up perfectly, it's just supposed to be kind of an abstract background. And then we're going to move into the Copic coloring. So she's all cut out because I printed her twice and didn't realize that my margins were set for, I print my images in just Windows Office, Microsoft Office. And so my margins were set really large and I didn't realize it. So they actually kind of printed too close to each other. So I ended up having to trim them out, but that's no big deal. I plan on fussy cutting her anyway. The way that I do my Copic coloring is I start from my lightest and then move out to my darkest. And so that's what I did. I started with the E50 and then I'm moving into the E00. And I'm looking at her because her head is down and her hair is kind of covering her face. So I knew that was going to be the darker part. So I did it as if there was a light source was coming from the like top right hand side-ish. Or just right-hand side, period. I'm still trying to figure out my light sources, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. Practice makes perfect. So if you're not good at it, keep trying. I am. So here you just want to make sure that you're using like a super light hand, especially with like her facial features, because they're very delicate. The fingers, are pretty delicate and tiny. So, I just try to use the tip of the marker. And I used to be really, when I would do my shading, I would use the same colors everywhere. And I've since learned that you don't really need to do that. You can get different depths by not applying your darkest shade everywhere, or by not applying your lightest shade everywhere. So I left the darkest shading off of like the left-hand side of her face. I only just put it directly next to her nose. I tried not to overshade her, and then when I go back for my second round to blend everything out, that's when I really start putting down more color. And it's because just me personally, however works for you, I just have a tendency to be a bit heavy-handed with my dark colors. So in order to keep myself in check, I just do small lines the first time around of where I want my darkest colors to be, and then I bring everything out the second time. I just feel more comfortable doing that. So if you are confident in your abilities to do everything on the first round, or you don't feel like you need the extra blending, then don't do it. If you feel like you need more blending, then maybe go over it 3 times. Like whatever makes you happy with your coloring, however it's going to look that you're going to be like I'm pleased with this. For me, it's usually twice, and I'm happy with that. So after I finished up her skin tone, I wanted to add in some blush. Her name is Shy Suzie, so I feel like she would be quite blushed if she was trying to hand a Valentine to somebody. And then this hair combination, I've actually owned these markers for a while, these 70s. They're super cool. No, yes, not warm at all. Super cool. And not like, oh my god, that's totally awesome. Like very ashy. So I knew I was going to have that bright background, and I wanted to give this a try. At the end of the day, I don't know that I loved it, but that's okay because at least I tried it out, and maybe it'll be something that I can use with other color combinations and might still work out for me. So I'm laying down my shadows with my lightest marker, and then I'm going to go ahead and go in and work out to my darkest. And when I do hair, I just do small flicks of color, and you want to, try to leave that highlight. Her highlight almost got, by the time I was done, almost got completely lost on the right-hand side there. And I don't really know how I let that happen. I think it's because it's tucked behind her ear, so I kept adding more shading. I wish I would have been a little less heavy-handed, but, everybody's a Monday morning quarterback, so I'll just know the next time that I color this image to be a little more light-handed. So I'm just, where I feel like it would be darker, where it's behind her shoulders, or where the darkest parts are tucked behind like her neck, I'm adding more dark than I would, like the top of her head, where, later her highlight will be, or on the sides of her hair where it kind of swings out. And when you're doing this, again, you want to be using a really light hand. They're supposed to be, quote unquote, strands of hair. So you want to give it a little bit of movement, a little bit of depth, and not just one solid color. And see here, I think this is where I went. That I'm using my darkest color, and you can see like that highlight is almost completely gone, and I didn't really know how to get it back, so I just had to kind of accept that it was what it was. And then from here, I'll start bringing back in the lighter colors, and I'll be going out just a little farther than I did before, than I did the first time around, but I'm still keeping it with the tip of the marker using light flicking so that it looks like strands of hair versus just solid color that I put down. And somehow, I'm not really sure, I ended up picking up my E71 instead of my E74, so I had to go back in and add that. And even then, I was hair is finicky. Like I fiddled with it a while. I went back in and added more dark. I felt like there wasn't enough contrast. And it could be just because I'm used to working with other color combinations, so I wasn't really sure how to get the look that I was going for, so I just kind of played around with it a lot. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. Like, don't be scared, just mess around with it until you're happy with the way that it looks. So for her skirt, I wanted it to be black, but I wanted there to be just some kind of like shiny highlights. It almost ends up looking striped. But when I do pleats, I do shading on either side of the pleat. So I put down the C1 and then the C3. This is the C5. And then the C7 is almost the exact same color as the C9. It's really difficult to tell them apart. Like you can tell apart the C7 and the C5, but the C7 and the C9 is very difficult. And I used to think that I didn't need the C9, but let me tell you, when you want to color something black, there's enough of a difference that it truly makes a difference. So with the C9, I just did a line of where it would be darkest. So whichever pleat was sitting behind the other one, that's where I added the C9. And then I blended that back out with the C7, and again, just working in reverse. I sound like a broken record. Lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. But that's what I'm doing, and you guys tell me you don't want me to play music, you want me to talk through the whole thing, so I am trying for you. So then out to the C5, and the ones that were in the back, I almost covered completely, or I did cover completely with the C3. And because they just wouldn't have as much light on them, they would be darker. And then I used the C1 on those three little front pieces. then afterward, because Copics are transparent, so they, if you put a lighter color over a darker color, it will pull it up. So I went back in and just added a little bit more C9 for some more definition. She has on these cute little thigh-high stockings, and I wanted to cover them. Yeah, I wanted to cover them. What? I wanted to color them white. So I'm using the same C markers, but I'm only using the C1 and C3, and then I'm just going to use a line of the C5 next to her, the thigh that's behind hers, and I used the 0 marker on the brightest points. With her sweater, I wanted it to kind of match the background, but I didn't really have anything that was that pink purple color. So I decided I was going to try to make my own. And I think it actually came out okay. I started with a RV55, and I'm just going in and putting I guess where the darkest shadows would be. And I didn't think that poor Suzie was going to be completely flat-chested, so I kind of give her a little bit of a shadow so she could have somewhat of a bust. And then I'm trying to leave like the areas that I think will be the lightest. Even if it's just a sliver of white, I'm leaving it white, and it does make a difference. I know that sounds crazy, but it really, really does. It makes a difference. So I got my RV55 down, and I picked that one because it is a more purple pink. And then I'm going back in with a VO4, and these don't look like they will blend together. This VO4 is so bright, and it just kind of overtakes everything, but they actually did end up blending okay. I think that they did. I think they came out with the color that I was looking for, which was more of like a magenta. No, is magenta that purple? I don't know. Purpley pink. Go with that. That's what I'm going with. It's purpley pink. So I just, I'm adding that, building up those darker layers, the darker shading on the sides, and putting a shadow on her right-hand side, even though that's the side that the light is coming from, because her hair is kind of covering up that arm. So I thought that there would be a little bit of a shadow there. And again, just, working those layers. I'm not taking the dark out as far as, my lighter colors. I'm trying to be conscientious about the blending, flicking on the color, but not completely covering the color before it. Why when I want to say coloring, I say covering, and when I want to say covering, I say coloring. Like, there's a serious problem here, folks. The RV69 probably was a little bit dark, and after all was said and done, I felt like maybe it didn't blend as well as it could have. But it was the best one I had for the job at the time. So here I'm adding the RV69 to like how her arm is like kind of extended with the Valentine. I added the RV69 on her waist, but I didn't add it to the left-hand side of her sleeve. I wanted there to be a delineation between the two, so I left that a little bit lighter. And now I'm just going to go back in, add more color, blend everything out together so it looks like it's supposed to. And you'll see I left a lot of white area here. That's just, how I prefer to do things, because whatever you leave white is going to be the lightest version of that RV55, and that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be lighter, highlighted, and I was really concerned about that VO4. I was really worried about how bright it was and how it would blend out, and it really, it worked out pretty nicely. So there's that. Don't be afraid to mix your color families. Don't be afraid to try a color combination maybe you wouldn't normally go with, because they can work out pretty nicely. So I'm just going to take that RV55 and I'm going to go over the entire sweater. So blending everything out, covering up all the highlights, so that they are the lightest version of that pink that they could be. And then I colored her barrettes. She has two little barrettes that are pinning her hair back the same color, but I didn't go back over them because it was such a small area. The Valentine hearts, I just did the smaller ones in the RV55 so everything would match, and the large one. I did a little bit of shading on, but not too much because, you know, it's supposed to be a handmade Valentine, so there wouldn't be a huge lot of detail. The C's, the same C's that I used for her stockings and her skirt, I'm going to use those for the Valentine. I wanted to do a little bit of shading, like where her hand would be with just my C1. And then I colored in the I and the U with the same ones and just kind of blended them out. Nothing spectacular there. I chose green for her eyes because green is a natural complement to purple or pink, like they're opposites on the color wheel. And so I just thought that that would be pretty. I could have used blue. I probably could have used brown too, and it would have been fine. So I did some detailing with my white gel pen. I added just little highlights in her eyes. And then, do you remember those sweaters? I used to have one my mother bought me, and they had like the little pulls on them, like little, I don't know, like little soft cotton pulls that made like a polka dot design on your sweater. Used to have one years ago when I was younger. So I wanted to kind of mimic that look. So I did that with my white gel pen on her sweater, and then I went back in with the V06 and just added a little bit of shading. I will warn you, you should not use your Copic markers over white gel pen. It can ruin your nibs. I personally don't care. I like the look enough to risk it, but they do tell you not to do it. So I'm giving you the fair warning. Try at your own risk. So I'm just darkening up some of those shadow areas that I felt like needed it. And then I'm going to go ahead and outline the whole image. This is a EK Success journaling pen. I picked the 0.25 because a lot of these lines are pretty fine. So I wanted it to be, you know, what Zoe had intended when she drew it. I added some Wink of Stella to her eyes, her barrettes, and then the little hearts on the Valentine. And then I fussy cut her out. I traced around the edges with a Memento Tuxedo black marker so that there wouldn't be any weird white edges that were sticking out. I wanted to give her a little bit of dimension, so I'm using the C1, C3, and C5 to give her a little bit of a shadow actually on the card base. So I'm, like I said, I was doing the shadow as if it was coming from the right-hand side. So I did the whole thing with the C5 and then went around it with the C3 and then finally the C1 before adding her just flat to the card base. If you're not comfortable doing those types of shadows and you've already fussy cut your image, just pop it up on a little bit of foam adhesive and she'll have a natural shadow. So once I get her down, and I did adhere her from the bottom to the top because I felt like that would be the easiest way to line everything up, then basically she's done because the I love you works as the sentiment. I didn't need to stamp or add anything extra. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will catch you at the next video. Bye.